I'm repeatedly confronted on my website by the idea that objective morality cannot possibly come from God. Several of the reasons they give: God is malevolent. Look at the Bible. And after all, he sends people to hell. Or they say, true objective morality means morality is independent from anything else, and that would include God. Another would say, God's morality derives from secular morality, because our perception of God's morality, God's moral nature, is based on a concern for human well-being. Well, there are a lot more than this, but you get the idea. I would say that morality doesn't come from God. It's intrinsic to God's being. It's not dependent on any standard or source for its existence other than the person of God. See, morals in that sense is a term ultimately describing what is true, and therefore also what is good. Therefore, my ground for believing in objective morality is God is good, and he is good all the time. In practicality, morals indubitably have to do with human well-being, but that is neither their ground nor their purpose. See, things aren't good because God says they are. Things aren't good because there is some first principle, some kind of ideal objective morality to which even God must conform. No, instead we begin and end with God is good. One of the reasons given at the beginning was that objective morality cannot come from God because God is malevolent. Look at all the terrible things he does in the Bible, and at the end of time he sends people to hell. But since the foundational teaching of the Bible is that God will be perfectly fair in his judgment of each individual, we can hardly conclude malevolence even in a negative judgment. C.S. Lewis wrote, "You object to the doctrine of hell. What are you asking God to do? To wipe out past sins at all costs and to give anyone who wants it a fresh start, smoothing difficulties and offering help? But God has done that. That's what his death and resurrection were all about. Okay then, are you asking God to forgive you? It's a relationship. He will forgive anyone who wants it, and cannot forgive those who choose not to be forgiven. Do you want God to leave you alone then? Well, I'm afraid that's what hell is." Lewis continues, "If a game is played, it must be possible to lose it. If there is a way that must be found by the will and by love, then it must be possible to refuse it. If the happiness of a person is honestly the result of self-surrender, then no one can make that decision except the person himself, and he may refuse. I would love to say everyone will be saved, but then I'd have to ask, will they be saved against their will or with it? And if I say against their will, then I'm in the middle of a contradiction. How can self-surrender and love be involuntary? But if the answer is with their will, it begs the question, what if they will not give in? So you see, the reality of hell does not make God malevolent. Let's go in a different direction. People say that the Bible is a moral guide. But this is not necessarily so. John Walton writes, instead of conceiving a moral system, the Bible doesn't do that. They see laws and obedience and crimes. But John says it's more accurate to conceive of morality in the Bible as analogous to the category of, say, health. In today's Western culture, very few things are considered as important as good health, which requires specifications on diet, nutrition, nutrients, exercise, etc. Doctors and researchers labor continually to determine what will lead to health. And frustration results when doctors give contradictory advice. Are eggs good or bad for you? Does vitamin C really fight colds or doesn't it? Even in today's science, it's difficult to provide an unambiguous list of specific guidelines for everyone. John continues, "It would complicate matters significantly and prove utterly frustrating and unreliable to look to the Bible to derive universally applicable principles for good health. The Bible's authors knew no such science, and God has offered no revelation concerning how to achieve good health, though no one would therefore conclude the idea of good health was irrelevant. Likewise, even though the Bible has lots of moral teaching in it, it's not there to guide us morally. We have very good reasons to say that God is interested in moral behavior. He wants us to be good. But if we want to pursue that goal, the Bible doesn't provide complete and unambiguous guidance to that." Back to the question at hand. Does objective morality come from the character of God? Well, the question's a little skewed. It's most accurate to say God is good. But someone will press harder. Is there such a thing as objective morality? I would say yes. Ravi Zacharias teaches, "The skeptic tells us that God cannot exist because there's too much evil evident in life. But if evil exists, then one must assume that good exists in order to know the difference. And if good exists, one must assume that a moral standard exists by which to measure good and evil. And if such a moral law exists, it must have a source, or at least an objective basis. By an objective basis, I mean something that is transcendentally true all the time, regardless of whether I believe it or not." We're back to the existence of God, and that God is good, and that He is good all the time. But someone will still press, are there things that are right all the time for us as humans? I would say yes. Holiness is always right. I would say it's always right to have love as a foundation in everything we think, say, and do. I would say fairness is always right. But is there anything that's always wrong? J. Warner Wallace argues, and I think rightfully so, that killing children for the fun of it has always been seen as wrong, everywhere, in all cultures and in all eras. There are many reasons that in certain cultures they kill children, but not for the fun of it. I know what I've said brings up a lot of questions, so let's discuss it. Use the comments below or come to my website, www.thethirdchoice.org, to the Q&A section, click on the Morality tab, and ask your question. Let's talk about it.